Warren Buffett gave him a few steps. He said, step one.
Welcome to the Young Leaders Podcast. I'm your host, Melina, and I'm super excited to bring you this podcast where we explore the journeys of successful leaders. Today's guest is a former Chief Revenue Officer and a current faculty member of the Ivy Business School, where he teaches sales and entrepreneurship. With experience in industries like retail tech and event technology, please welcome Mr. Eric Janssen.
This episode is sponsored by my 911 Inc.
Hello, Mr. Janssen. Welcome to the Young Leaders Podcast. How are you doing today?
Melina, I have never been happier in my whole life.
That's amazing. I am super happy as well. Well, we're going to start off this podcast with a mystery question that was left from our previous guest. Are you ready?
Let's do it.
The question is, what is your process for decision-making and prioritizing tasks?
This is a good one. My process for decision-making and prioritizing tasks. Big planning nerd. And so I've got a document, and I teach my classes to create a similar document that I call Me Inc. And so the idea is I've got a similar way that you'd think about planning a business, like what are the priorities and what does really good look like, and how can I break down my goals into bite-sized pieces, like by year and by quarter. So I've got a document that I built called Me Inc., and it has all of these things in it. So I have quotes and anecdotes and principles and strengths and weaknesses and plans and all these things in one document. So the way that I think about planning is I look at what's the big 10-year, what's the 10-year vision look like? What are the things that I can do that are going to get me closer to that 10-year vision? And then does it make sense for me to sub in one of those things either this year or this quarter? So that's sort of big picture how I think about prioritization. And then like sort of daily execution, I have a capture system that I use called Trello. And so in Trello, it's sort of a project management software, and I've got different boards for different parts of my life. So I've got a family board, I've got an Ivy board, I've got an EJ outside of Ivy board. And so anytime an idea, something that I need to do comes to me, I have a capture system. So I'll put it in my parking lot on one of those boards. And then on a weekly basis, I kind of decide which one of those things need to come into my, need to do right now board. And then once they're in there, then they get put into a calendar for me to do that week or that month. So maybe more complex than most people, but that's how I think about it.
Well, that's cool. Have you heard of the Eisenhower Matrix?
I have.
Yeah, that's what I've used. And a lot of people that I've spoke to, they actually say that they use that one. Have you used the Eisenhower Matrix?
So when I used the Eisenhower Matrix a lot, actually, was when I was working at early and growth stage businesses or founding companies. And often there's so many different things to think about, it can be overwhelming. So as a way to think about what are the most urgent things that are the most important, it's helpful for me to write all of those things out and then try to focus on the ones in that upper right quadrant first.
Yeah. Okay. Well, out of those two, which one's been your favorite then?
So can I give you a third that I think is actually a more interesting one?
Yeah, of course.
So Warren, there's a story of Warren Buffett, and he was talking to, I don't know if it was his pilot, but it was a pilot who was trying to prioritize tasks. And Warren Buffett gave him a few steps. He said, step one, write down the 25 things that are the most important things on your list right now. So the person wrote them all down. And then he said, step two, circle the most important 3. So they circled the next 3. And the person said, okay, so it must be that, like, obviously I'd focus on the first 3, and then that gets most of my time. And then the other ones, they kind of get the extra time that I've got when I'm not focusing on that 3. And Buffett said, no, those 3 are the only 3 that are on your list right now. So you need to completely eliminate the other 22. Those don't even exist. Put them on a separate piece of paper, and you only bring on one of the other priorities when one of those gets eliminated from your top 3.
Wow, that's amazing. Okay, so now so you've had a really good experience in sales as you were a chief revenue officer, I believe. And so what has been the most ridiculous sales pitch that you've ever heard?
Ever heard or ever given?
Both.
I hear a lot of business ideas. So a lot of people approach me wanting to get validation on their startups. And so, I'm trying to think about like specific examples of wild and crazy business ideas that I've ever heard. And I'll say this about it. While I can't tell you one specific one that stands out as being ridiculous, I've learned to not filter out what I think are ridiculous ideas. Because sometimes what I think is ridiculous, if I'm not the target market, I don't want to deter someone from going after an idea because I think it's crazy. It might actually be an amazing idea for somebody else. So I used to like filter out and have these strong opinions on like, oh, that's a bad idea and here's why. And now I just ask lots of questions like, oh, interesting. Like, who's that for? Why would they buy it? Why do they care? So I can't think of one specific one that I've been like, that's crazy out of hand. I'm just thinking, it's not for me, but like, help me understand who that actually is for.
Okay, well that's a good way to approach it, I guess. It doesn't make the others feel sad then if you're like, okay, that's a ridiculous idea.
That's right.
Because that's where all the ideas grow from.
That's right.
So you've been teaching also at the Ivy Business School. Yes, as a teacher you teach, but what has been something that you've learned from another student that's really maybe changed something or changed the way that you've thought of something and been a big impact?
The biggest thing is that you can't teach a student to ride a bike in a classroom. And so what I mean by that is, I think sometimes we, and me, I'm included, fall into the trap of thinking that, I present and I try to be engaging and I try to make beautiful slides and tell good stories and get people along for the journey. And often I can get the whole room, kind of like nodding along. And we can sometimes make the mistake of thinking that because they're smiling that they've captured everything and they're going to go do it. And there's a big knowing doing gap. There's a big gap between knowing what to do and actually doing it. And so what I've learned from a lot of the students is that I need to manufacture experiences for them that get them as close to doing the actual thing as possible. So what I try to do in my classes, given what I get to hear feedback from students, and when I hear from them they've been working now for a number of years, what's been most valuable, it's that I need to be able to introduce a concept in an engaging way, maybe some storytelling with some nice visuals, and then quickly find a way to get them to actually do the thing, inevitably fail at it and not do very well at it, and then find a way to get better at it over time. So what I've learned from them is the teaching is not just speaking well. I actually need to get them to do the thing and get corrected as they go.
That's amazing. And what would be, so if you could travel back in time, when you were, I don't know, maybe my age or one of your students' age, what would be an advice, whether in sales or entrepreneurship, that you would want to give yourself?
I think often in starting a business, if you are entrepreneurial, you often compare your current reality to the press releases of other businesses. So I would see, I feel like, oh my gosh, like I don't know what I'm doing and I don't have it figured out and things are blowing up all over the place and I'm so bad at this. And I look at other people, whether they're peers or colleagues or people that I admire, and you constantly see them raise a new round of financing, close a new deal, like all of the things that come up on your feed nowadays where you're like, man, they're crushing it. And what I realize now is having been on both sides, been on the team that is not crushing it and is in the crap, and been on the team that is in the news, raising lots of money and closing big deals, they're actually all messed up. So every startup don't compare your current reality to other people's press releases, because the press release is, or what you see on, Instagram or TikTok is the beautified version of what it actually is. Every business, I promise you, whether it's, the Silicon Valley based company that just raised $100 million, or especially them, or the London, Ontario based startup that's just trying to get their first couple customers, they're all messed up in their own unique ways. It's really just a matter of degrees. So I would say, 20-year-old Eric, don't compare your reality to the illusion of other people's glorified press releases.
I guess because I think that many people do always compare themselves. I know I do sometimes. The more you fail, the more you'll succeed.
That's right. It's probably the single biggest lesson that I hope people get in my entrepreneurship classes. So one, that rejection and resilience, so your ability to get rejected and turned down and fail, is a leading indicator of future success. So your ability to endure it, to face it and to get rejected and feel like crap for a little bit, but then be able to bounce back. Your ability to do that it's a muscle that can be trained. And your ability to do that quickly is a leading indicator of future success. So that's one. And two, innovation is iteration. So the first version of the thing, whatever the thing is, whether it's a podcast or a product or a service, the first version is almost always garbage. The second version gets better. The third version gets even better. And almost every company has a story like this, right? If you look into the story of Airbnb and how they got started, investors wouldn't invest. Nobody was renting their service. Had they quit the first time or second time or fifth time, there would be no Airbnb today. Canva started as a yearbook planning software. Slack started as a massive open online game. Like every single big company that you see today that you're like, wow, look at them. They've gone through a bunch of iterations. So innovation is iteration. The first idea is never the idea.
And what's one failure that you've seen or you've been through that really, I guess, changed your perspective and helped you change what you're doing?
I've seen it from a few different perspectives. So I'm thinking there's some recency bias here, but I'll speak to one more recently. So there's a company that I invested in that one of my students started, and it didn't end up working out. And I invested not because I loved the idea, though I thought the idea was novel. I invested mainly for him and his team. And I think people believe that if you fail, it's all over, right? Oh my gosh, I raised all this money and people don't trust me and they don't believe in me. And what's going to happen, I'm never going to be able to show my face again. I'm so embarrassed. But the reality, at least from my perspective as an investor, it's really the first investment that I don't make a ton of investments, but it was my first investment where straight up like went to zero, right? There's no return, no hope. It's just gone, dead. And what I felt from the other side as the investor was like, it was money that I was prepared to lose. I made a bet on this person and it didn't work out, but they tried their best. And I would still want to have a conversation with them. I would still, if they're going to do another thing, I would consider investing in their next thing. And so, that's again, recency effect, but I would want people to know that the failure might sting in the moment, but isn't as enduring as people think.
That's amazing. Well, thank you so much, Mr. Janssen. I think this was an amazing conversation, and I hope our viewers enjoyed this just as much as I did.
Awesome. Thank you, Melina.